Welcome to another episode of Roll or Die. Today we have for you another OG of the Melbourne scene. People who have been around the traps probably know this guy. He's been around for a really long time. One of my old teammates from Devine. And we're going to dig up some dirt on him today. We have for you Dan Ward. Thanks for joining us, Wardy.
Hey guys, pleasure to be part of it.
Awesome, man. It's great to have you. I've only met you once, man. We did a monthly masters out at True Grit, and it was awesome, man. You got a great space out there, man.
Yeah, look, it was a good day, and I've been sort of planning on running one of those or hosting one of those for a little while. So it was nice to get that opportunity and see how many of us are out there still sort of grinding away. And
yeah, awesome.
Just getting on with it, like not worrying about whether or not you can beat the young blokes or anything, but just enjoying the camaraderie and the physical effort that it requires, all that sort of stuff. It just, I think it keeps you young.
Absolutely, man. 100%.
Yeah, it was good fun.
Now, for those who are watching rather than listening, we have to probably take the opportunity to admire your facial hair, which we're coming to the end of November. So this is for Movember. Anyone that's listening, sorry, you're going to miss the beauty of this magnificent facial hair.
I think, actually, if you're listening, his hair is probably poking out through the earbuds and into your ears.
So I don't know if this episode will come out before the end of November, but is there an opportunity for people to still donate on your afterwards?
Yeah, there is. If you just go to danward@movember.com, you should be able to donate. But and look, I don't expect people to donate large sums of money. I've had a few kids at school and some of the teachers at school have donated. We've got a team going for Brighton Secondary College as well, and we're up, I think, somewhere around the $2,000 mark there. Nice. So we sought permission to get some of the kids, if they wanted to and they could grow a moustache and not have to shave it off, because that's one of our school rules, is no facial hair for the kids. But I sort of got that over the line, and they were allowed to if they could, but they could do anything else as well. Like Movember's really come along since you've got to start afresh and you've got to grow a moustache. They've been as inclusive as they can be. So you can literally do anything. You can put something up, you can set yourself a challenge, you can, colour it, you can do whatever you want. Yeah. As long as you're raising money and starting the conversation about men's health issues, that's really all it is.
That makes a lot of sense. I like that a lot, man.
Yeah.
And what, like you were telling us before, that you get laryngitis like 5 times a year because you're doing a lot of talking, a lot of yelling. I can relate to that because I coach my kids' basketball team, and like by the time one basketball match is over, I'm wrecked for the weekend, man. So how do you? Tell me about your life in that area.
Oh well, look, I'm still full time at Brighton Secondary College, teaching PE from year 7 right through to year 12. And we've got a large double gymnasium, which is quite often double, triple booked, and we've got a fitness room. So it might be class in the fitness room. There's maybe a group of year 7s playing basketball or dodgeball on one side, and they're just making a hell of a racket. And then you've got a year 7 or a year 8 class on the other side. We're trying to give instructions to them and be heard over what's going on over the other side. You're not necessarily shouting, but you're really raising your voice. And if you're not as adept at looking after your voice and projecting your voice the way a singer might, which I'm no singer, let me tell you, you do actually strain your vocal cords quite significantly. And if I'm also then teaching in the morning before I go to work, and then after Mondays and Wednesdays I coach until about 8:30, 8:45. So I'm doing a lot of talking, and sometimes it's quite a volume when I'm in the gymnasium trying to be heard, and then you teach in the classroom, and it's just that. It's just another one of my, I suppose, one of my attributes that I'm constantly using. And like anything, if you do a lot of running, it's more easy. If you do a lot of talking and a lot of raised voice, that's sort of every now and then. And like when I saw you, I was just on the end of it, and I basically like someone sticking their thumb right into your external notch here, and it just feels like someone's throttling you the whole time. So I work my defence on chokes for about a week. I don't have a choice. Just constantly just trying to keep my voice safe and just, I suppose, just resting it.
Yeah.
And Dan, you said that when you use something a lot, you sort of really overuse it. Yeah. From memory, you've got 2 steel hips. Tell us about that.
1 steel, 1 titanium.
Whoa.
My left hip's a cobalt steel Birmingham, which is a resurfacing. So what they've essentially done is grind down the head of the femur. And if you can imagine that with the head of the femur, they've just put a metal cap over the top of it, and it's got like a chuppa chup stick that goes into the neck of the femur. They glue it down with a little bit of bone cement, and then gravity takes over essentially. So they put a new socket in, and you've just got 2 new joint surfaces. Whereas my right one is a total hip, so that's like a titanium spike that goes about halfway down my thigh, with a much smaller prosthetic head than the left hip. And I believe it's a plastic cup that goes into what wasn't everyone, but I have to what they call ream it out with essentially like one of those big mining devices that they use to build the tunnels. It's like it goes on the end of a drill, and it's quite literally a drill, and they drill it out and grind out all the old cartilage, make any space they need to make it so that it fits perfectly. But once the cup's glued in, gravity takes over, and all of your joint, all of your connective tissues and soft tissues take over, and once you re-strengthen it, you're very right. Like I'm sort of squatting and deadlifting more now than before I had them done.
Well, what's the reason for this sort of like requirement, man? What have you been doing with those hips?
Well, look, I was born in the UK.
Yeah.
And
that explains it then. That's fine then.
Yeah, that explains it.
Right.
All right, so let's move on. Next topic. I was born in the UK, and I'm speaking to my mum and dad. I wasn't born in a hospital per se. It was kind of a almost like an urgent thing. It was like a day centre type thing where you went in and you didn't necessarily have surgery and stay for ages. And I don't believe they did the requisite testing to check for hip dysplasia. So I had hip dysplasia, didn't know anything about it. Mum and dad didn't know. And then I proceeded through my youth to do pretty much everything that I should. I was playing basketball at a sort of reasonably high level, I guess. I was playing in the local A reserve and A team, and played in some junior development squads, but playing a lot of basketball. And then I was involved in weight training and bodybuilding, and did that for 10, 12 years or whatever.
Right.
But all of this stuff without any knowledge of this degenerative kind of hip issue that I had. And I got to about, I think I moved over here in about 98. And I remember thinking to myself, I'd started jiu-jitsu, it was probably 2000. I started to get this really like a throbbing pain in one of my hips. And one of the guys that I was training with at the time, Andrew Mao, he's a doctor. He's like, oh, you just need to do these stretches. That's all. Well, words to this effect anyway. And we just kind of kept trying to loosen off the hip flexors. And this is what it must be. I'm only 26 or 27, whatever I was. In the end, I went to a specialist and got some x-rays done, and he just went, oh, well, you've got advanced arthritis in both hips and you need them both replaced. And
wow.
Sorry, what? And I say that into my good ear. Because I'm actually deaf in my left ear as well. So
oh my
that's just
goodness.
the name of lucky. Yeah.
That's why you should never be born in the UK, everybody. Okay.
Well, exactly. Yeah, try and avoid it if you can. Not rated. Do not recommend. Yeah, and so I just sort of went, well, he said to me, well, you're going to have to stop doing what you do. You can play golf. You might be able to play doubles tennis. And I said, okay, now let's go back to the real world where I'm not going to give up any of those things, and you're just going to have to tell me how to manage it. Yeah. So he said, well, we could do a couple of little surgeries and get rid of things they call osteophytes, which are just like little gnarly bits of bone that grow around the joint to try and prevent you moving the joint a little bit too much. So I went to a different surgeon, David Young, and he's reasonably famous or infamous around the orthopedic where he does a lot of footballers and celebrities and things like that. And he just sort of chopped out a lot of those osteophytes in the joint, gave it a good clean out. And it probably brought me about 8 to 10 years out of that particular hip. And then the other one started to cause me problems. And in the end, I went ahead with the initial hip, got that one resurfaced, and was just like, this is amazing. All of a sudden, I can use at least one of my legs for some sort of a guard. And then when I had the other one done, I haven't looked back. I started being able to do different types of guards that I've never even been able to consider. Because someone would just put a little bit of pressure on the inside of my knee or control a leg and flip your legs, and it'd be like, oh, just stop. Or I'd have to just completely bail out of that position and let them pass because it was too painful to try and resist.
Wow.
And that was diabolical. Like, it was really, the pain would get me awake at night. I was on some pretty heavy kind of pain meds, not opiates, but I forget which one it was called, but they banned it in the States and they banned it over here as well, because it was causing heart attacks and things. But then it was just Celebrex and ibuprofen and all the rest of the stuff you can get over there.
So, Danny, you saying you've done most of your jiu-jitsu with these hips?
Yeah, I started jiu-jitsu before I actually knew I had any problem. And then it really became a thing that I used to pay particular attention to, or have to take particular attention to. I think either just as I got my blue or just after. So about 2000 maybe, 2000, 2001 maybe, somewhere in there. And it was there that I knew that I had this issue and I just had to either manage it or go in and have the surgery. And one of the surgeons sort of suggested, look, if you wait a little bit, the technology is improving dramatically. We might be able to look at using different technology, blah, blah, blah. Went on and did the initial hip, which is the resurfacing. And now the new method that they use, it's an OPS method, which is optimal positioning system. And they take a variety of different x-rays in different positions of the hip, then use some software that finds all of the perfect angles for you to get the maximum amount of movement out of your hip. They 3D print a guide that will help them put the actual it will slot over the top of the bone, and then they can guide it into place perfectly so it's the best possible result you can ask for. And I've got that in my right hip. And honestly, if I go for a jog, and I'm not really built for running, but if I did go for a jog, my left hip starts to burn a little bit and it stops me and I have to have a bit of a stretch, whereas my right hip I don't notice.
Amazing.
Anybody's out there looking at needing a hip replacement and you're like, oh, I'm too young, get it done.
Wow.
If you don't.
Awesome.
Seriously, I'm back lifting the weights I was lifting when I was in my early 20s.
Amazing. And
and training jiu-jitsu with no hip pain at all.
Did you notice, like, up until, like, obviously it started, as you said, it started to give you trouble at blue belt, but before then, like through all your childhood years where you were doing all of these things, were they giving you trouble then, or was it just nothing, and then, oh shit, you know?
A little bit like that. There was no real issues. I never really had anything that I that would make me go, oh, I think there's something wrong here. Although, and the basketballers amongst us might be able to attest to this. When you're playing junior basketball and you're practicing your defensive position and they're getting you to shuffle around the court, across all the lines, and you've got to stay low in this deep squat position. And I just kept saying to my coach, I just can't do it. And he's like, yes, you can. And he was literally kicking me in the backside, trying to get me to go down lower. And I was like, I just can't do it. And the more I look back on that, I think that was probably because the hip just wasn't built.
Interesting.
Whereas these days, apart from the dodgy left knee, I can pretty well squat heels to butt to the heels, you know, with no hip issues at all. It's more my knees that cause me the problem.
And brilliant, man.
And I'm really stoked with the outcome. I would recommend. One of my guys actually is 58. He's just had his done and he's back at training, and he's a killer. He's 58. That's Ron, and he was really bothered by this hip. I said, "Go and get it done, mate. Honestly, the outcome will be so much better than the way you feel now. You won't even know yourself." And he trains every single minute.
Wow.
He does an hour with us, and he absolutely sticks it to us. You've really got to beat him, otherwise. He's old school Kiwi, rugby union, black belts in this and that, and just doesn't take a backward step.
I love it.
Now, Dan, a bit of dirt that I've dug up on you as well. I believe that you were a piss tester for USADA. What can you tell us about that?
That's one way of putting it. That is one way of putting it, I suppose.
You can thank Dave Nickel for that
I was responsible
little
for
nugget.
maintaining the integrity of sport, but yeah, I used to take the piss out of Australian athletes, which is much easier to do these days. But yeah, I started work with ASDA at the time. I was training a young bloke who he was racing Formula Ford. I was training him to try and get his body weight down and help him manage the G's and all that sort of stuff that he experiences when he's racing. But getting him as light as we could was going to be really beneficial so that they could re-weight the cars, get better downforce and all that sort of technical stuff. And he got selected for a drug test, and I went along with him as his representative. And just off the cuff just sort of said, "Oh, don't suppose there's any jobs going, is there?" And the lady who was there, Fiona, who I ended up working with, just said, "Well, actually, there is." I applied, went through a 2 or 3 stage process of having to give an educational talk in front of a board of about 3 or 4 people within the organisation, and I ended up getting the gig. So that was good fun. Went overseas with it, went to Indiana and tested the duel in the pool, which is a swimming event. It was the first year they ran it between Australia and the US, which was it was interesting. Right in the middle of Indiana, went across to Indiana University and saw where Isaiah Thomas played when he was a kid and all that sort of stuff, and that was good fun. Got abused by a lot of people that I used to look up to. So
like a parking inspector of sports, man. That's what you're like.
Parking inspectors, like they've got nothing. Absolutely, they don't know the half of it. Seriously. Wow. Some of the abuse I've copped off elite level footballers, rugby league players, swimmers. Butter wouldn't melt on their mouth when they're on the TV, but when you're notifying them that they've been randomly selected for a test after an event, oof, you get an education.
Oh, man.
You've got to have a thick skin. Unfortunately, I have one of those.
Did you ever have any of those awkward drop their piss and smash it on the ground moments, or is that...
No, I haven't, but I've had I did have moments where, through nobody's fault, where the athletes put their sample down after they've done it and wandered off, and then come back to their sample, and I've had to say, right, well, the issue that we've got is you've left your sample unattended, so we have to bottle this one, and then we have to sit around and wait again for another one and bottle that one.
It could be tampered with.
Custody. Well, it potentially could have been, and that would give them an out should anything pop up. So we bottle that and make a note that athlete placed sample down and moved away from it, came back, we bottled it, did a second sample. And
I hate you even more after that. Oh my goodness.
Well, that was an AFL player, and it was about 1 a.m. at the time. Let's just say we're probably not on the best of terms.
Lucky you're so big, man. Lucky you're so big.
Yeah.
Look, it was good fun. Good fun. A bit of an eye-opener, though. Like, a lot of my mates are all like, "Oh, you're just cynical, Wardy. You're just cynical. You just reckon everyone's on it." And I'm like, well, when you're beating guys who've all been done for taking some sort of performance-enhancing drugs, and you're beating them, it's got to make you question what's going on, doesn't it? Like cycling, I would still maintain that cycling is life. They got away with doing it for so many years, flying under the radar by just managing their test protocols and how they went about all their injections and what they were taking. And in certain sports, it's almost set up. Their rules are set up to avoid getting caught. Like international cycling, at one point, you basically just checked the board to see if you'd been picked, and then you had an hour to arrive at doping control. Whereas here, you are notified, and that person does not leave your side until you pass your sample. So there's no opportunity to disappear and do anything dodgy. Whereas UCI rules used to be you had up to an hour to arrive at doping control, and nobody had to see you in that hour up until you arrived. So,
interesting.
It was ways and means of manipulating what was going on.
I'm fascinated to know what you can do in an hour, but I don't think we've got time to dive into that.
Well, I guess massive amounts of saline through drips helps to sort of increase your plasma content and decrease hematocrit. So if you're using EPO, it doesn't look like you've got too many red blood cells because the percentages fall back within a normal range.
Interesting.
Science of it's a little bit beyond me, but that's the sort of stuff that can get
right.
I think testing's come a long way in
and Dan, you've also done some TV commercials. Can you tell us about those?
I think I ran the Olympics for a few people. There was a Google commercial that I was in, and where I was sort of there's a young girl with pink hair, and she was buying stuff for her next door neighbour, and we have an interaction in a chemist. And I think I saw it on one ad break. It was on 3 times. So friends of mine are like, I hope you're getting paid every time this comes on, but a lot of people said, thanks, Wardy, you've just ruined my Olympics. Every time I turn it on, all I see is your stupid head.
You're the best, man.
Just deal with it.
So when are you getting a job as a parking inspector, bro?
Pardon?
When are you getting a job as a parking inspector for the trifecta? Just
I've been here, there, and everywhere. I might as well. Why not? Yeah, but I sort of jokingly say, when people say, "How'd you get into that?" I say, "Oh, I was approached on the street." They go, "Really?" No, I wasn't. I know somebody that owns like a talent agency, and she just said, "Oh, let's just get some photos and chuck it out there." And I said, "Oh, I'm always up for a laugh. Why not?"
Yeah.
And I think I got the first 3 or 4 gigs that I went for. So
Amazing.
I'm like, "Well, this is easy. Let's just keep doing this." And then it kind of dropped off, and it's up and down, and you get some, and you don't, and then it is what it is. And you're doing it. I'm not doing it to survive. It's just a bit of fun on the side.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that, man. Good on you. And it's like you are a very you've got a good energy about you for that sort of stuff. You know what I mean? You're self-effacing and you're just fun and light, but you've got all the right qualities, I reckon, bro. So
I think just don't take yourself too seriously.
Mm-hmm.
I reckon that's the secret to life, really.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
Have respect for yourself, but don't take yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
There's always time to sort of let your guard down and have a bit of fun.
Agreed, brother. Agreed.
Yeah.
Kim, are you going to ask the question we ask every guest?
I can. You've touched on it already anyway, Wardy, but you mentioned that you started jiu-jitsu way back. So what, around 98? How did you discover it?
I think it was 98. It was 98 or 99, I think. Look, I moved over from, and this is probably going to make a lot more sense again. I moved over from Tassie because I grew up in Tassie. When we moved from the UK, we moved to Tasmania. And I grew up in Hobart, and then I went into university in Launceston. And I was training in a style of Kung Fu down there called Lama Kung Fu, which was a Tibetan style, like a long arm traditional style. And this was before, it wasn't before the UFC, but it was before it was kind of really readily available. So like one guy that was part of the club had a UFC 1 VHS.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I went around to his place one afternoon with a couple of other guys. We just watched that. And I mean, it's pretty much the standard story. I think we just went, hang on. This isn't right. Why are all these big guys getting beaten by that little skinny guy in the PJs? Anyway, one of them said, "Oh, you should, if you're going to Melbourne, you should have a look at it because it's everywhere over there." I'm like, "Well, I might do. We'll see how we go." And then I just sort of, to the back of my mind, didn't think about it. I moved into St Kilda when I moved over here and just received a postcard that was probably just a postcard drop, just like a mail out, but not mailed out to me or anybody in particular, but someone walking around. And it was I think it was for 10 free sessions, no questions asked, to being down in Berkeley Street.
Amazing.
What have I got to lose? So I sort of took myself off down there, took the postcard in, and I was, to paint the picture, I was probably about 88, 90 kilos, had been doing pretty much nothing but lifting weights. At the time, I know my students will laugh when I say this, but I was reasonably lean at the time. And, like I actually looked like I lifted weights. And I walked in and, again, I kid you not, I was paired with this kid. He was a yellow belt. He was about just a bit shorter than me, freckles. He had the big Alfred E. Newman ears, red hair and buck teeth. And I just sort of looked at Peter and went, "Are you sure this is a good idea? Like, really? Like, I'm going to hurt this kid, surely." And so I reckon 7 different shades he choked me over the next 40, 45 minutes. I'm looking around the room and you got Ivan Rakitic. We had a young bloke named Marlon, who was a blue belt. I can't remember if Darren McKean was still in St Kilda or not, but it might have been Jay or Andrew Bailey might have been there as well. These are all guys that were like OG guys who've all gone their separate ways up into Queensland and whatnot. There were some animals in that room, like guys who basically started the gym in Melbourne, along with the other guys from the Will Academies and those guys like your Cam Rose and Dave Harts and those guys. These guys were the original, like they were blue belts, they were gods. And I'm looking around this room at these 90 plus kilo units going, well, if this kid's just done this to me, every other single person in this room can absolutely hand me my backside.
Yeah.
He's been beaten up. He was 15, and I think I asked him, and he said he was 53 kilos. Like I should have been able to ring him into a tight ball and throw him out the window. But he just was all over me like a rash. And I just remember thinking, well, there's something to this. I best come back.
Yeah.
Sort of swallowed pride and kept coming back until eventually, bought the first gi, the Krugans. It was an unbleached Krugans gi that I bought. And, with the belt that looked like it had been made out of a bit of leftover gi material. It was just a scrappy little thing. And that's where it started. And I guess you do as many classes as you could. And I was working for myself initially and had a lot of free time during the day. So I'd do the day class and then the night class. And you literally just hang your gi up and let it dry out as best you could and put it back on wet if you had to. Well, it went. Like the concept of having multiple gis wasn't really a thing. If you did have more than one, you had two. Because Corral weren't even in the country, Vulcan weren't in the country. You could get Krugen, and that was about it.
Man, that room.
You had to wait about a month, didn't you, if you ordered it? Like it didn't even.
Yeah. He had a few in the academy, but you didn't have your size. You just waited, I guess. You could buy
I can't
stuff on
even
the internet,
imagine what that room would smell like. But that aside, man.
Not great. But in the middle of winter, putting on a wet gi after it's been sitting there for an hour or more, and then you got to put it back on. You're still like, how much do I want to do this? Do I want to go home, or should I just chuck it on and deal with it?
What was your learning style like? I'm mindful of time. We only have 4 minutes 45 seconds left. But what?
Oh, wow.
I know something about the Devine kind of style is just get in there and roll and work it out. Mostly is what I heard it was. At least was training. But when you started, how did you learn jiu-jitsu? What were the classes like?
Well, we get shown some days you walk in and you go, right, any questions? And if you had an issue that you had with a particular position or something that you were trying, we could talk through that and break it down, and then everybody go off and you drill that. But it'd be, this is what we're doing today. And then we'd have a few moments to, for 10, 15 minutes, you go through it, practice it a bit, and then you go into just basically shark tanking. And I call that the bull ring at my gym because we have a bull as a logo. But essentially, there was no drilling with an opponent who's just passive. It was live roll, start in this position, go. And that was what you did. And I guess I feel like that way of learning probably slowed people's learning down in the beginning because you didn't have these high-ranked people above you, whereas these days you can go into a club and there's 10, 12 black belts and as many browns and as many purples or more and even more blues. And if you're a white belt, you get all these people to learn from. Whereas we had probably 3 or 4 blue belts and that was that. So the learning took place, but it took place at a slower rate. And obviously we didn't have access to YouTube and all that type of thing. So any information that we got came from the boss or it came from somebody who'd seen something or who trained with someone else and had done it this way. And you just sort of muddled your way through. Whereas these days, because I've been without a coach, like a direct coach, for the last 5 years that I've been running the business, and I've been using a lot of YouTube to look at what people are doing and why they're doing that. Not necessarily just for techniques, but what's the concept behind what they're doing.
Love it.
What's the main emphasis behind what they do, and then let's work on this. But I reckon I've done more learning in the last 5 years than I did probably for the first 10.
Amazing.
Through just being forced to have to think outside the box. And
you would have gained something from that. You would have gained something though from that muddling and that positional work. Something amazing as well, probably that others don't get. Maybe.
Yeah, I think. I think what it really did, because I would say that a lot of those sessions, there was far more physicality about it. Like when you were training, you were in a fight without punches. Like people were really driving their shoulder into your face. They were doing the things that they need to do to soften you up a little bit so you let them go so they could get out. Otherwise, you're just lying there holding each other aggressively for 10, 15 minutes. So you really steeled yourself against that type of pressure and intensity. So now I feel really comfortable when people pass my guard these days, and I let my students, and sometimes they get passed as well. I feel really confident because I'm really happy being stuck underneath people. And part of that is where I was back in the beginning, and part of it is returning from hip surgeries and knee surgeries. I've had an ACL reconstruction as well. And just being forced to, I'm just going to lie on my back and you just try and finish me. And I'm really confident underneath that I'm unlikely to get finished. And I'll be able to guard back get myself out and get on top. And so that's opened up my guard passing and my sweeping and my general guard play, because I don't worry about ending up on the bottom of it. I mean,
I'm just going to stop you there, Dan, because we're nearly out of time. But I want to say thank you so much for giving up your time. And
a pleasure.
We will have this episode out probably a couple of weeks. So if you could share it with your students, especially, because I know you've got a great club down there, True Grit. Go check it out if you're ever down. Where are you exactly?
We're in Moorabbin. We're not far from not far from Two Brothers Brewery, which is an added bonus. It's just a short hop, skip, and a jump after training for a nice pint of the local. But welcome to have drop-ins anytime if anyone wants to come in and just sort of change the scenery. We're more than happy to have people. There's no politics down there. I know there's
man, you rock.
There's none, but there is.
Awesome. All right.
Come back on, man. Come back on. We'll get you.
We could have you on again. Yeah, you could talk another whole episode, I'm sure, with more stories. So yeah, we might hit you back on.
Marbles, Kim.